What's up everyone, my name is BQ and I am here with my comparison of Android versus iOS. Now for the diehards, I know this is not going to sway you one way or the other, but for those of you who genuinely want to know which one is better or worse, which there not really is a better or worse one, but for those of you who want to know and who are trying to decide which one to go for, this video should help you. So let's get into it. Now, when it comes to the ease of use of using Android versus iOS, I would say this one goes to iOS because it is just generally easy to use. But that is not to say that Android is hard to use. With older Androids, it was typically if you were a bit older and you weren't so clued into technology, then it was quite difficult to use. But newer Androids are very easy to use. I would still give it to Android. I mean, I would still give it to iOS, but I would say it's fairly close, especially recently. But if you do have an older device, then Android is not very easy to use, but on newer ones, it's fairly close. Now, customizability. This has to go to Android. Android is so easy to customize. It is so you can load whatever skins you want, you can load whatever home screens you want. You can actually customize it and make it your own. Whereas on iOS, it just sort of feels like if you have someone else, if you look at yours compared to someone else's, it'll more or less be the same apart from a wallpaper and some different apps. But otherwise, it's gonna look the same. So if you really want to make the device seem like it's your own, then Android is definitely your way to go. Now, when it comes to longevity of your device, this really depends on which device you get. On the Apple side, you're more or less guaranteed for a long-lasting device. That is almost guaranteed. I've had an iPad 2 now for just over 4 years, and it still works pretty well. You can watch, I have a video up on how the iPad 2 compares in 2016, so you can watch that if you want. But on the Android side, it sort of depends on which brand and what price tier you go for. If you buy a really cheap device from a really bad brand, it's not going to last that long and it's just going to be a very terrible device to use. But if you go for a more premium device from a more high-end manufacturer, then obviously you're more or less guaranteed for a long-lasting device. So it depends on how much you're willing to pay and stuff like that. So now for quality is more or less the same as longevity. For Apple, you're more or less guaranteed good quality. But for Android, it also depends on which brand and what price tier you go for. If you go for a really low-end device from a really unknown and terrible manufacturer, you're more or less guaranteed to get a device that's really crappy quality. But if you go for something from Samsung or HTC or LG, and you go for a high-quality device, and even some of the low-quality ones are still, even some of the low price tier devices are still quite high quality. But some of the more high-end devices, that's when you're stepping into getting like metal construction and fingerprint readers, and stuff like that. And now onto the last one, which is pretty important: battery life. When it comes to battery life on Apple, it depends on which device you get. On their iPads, the battery life is amazing. I cannot complain about battery life on my iPad. I can get through a day of constant use on it. But when it comes to their phones, the battery life is a bit lacking. I've talked to some people who have the iPhone 6 and 6S, and they say the battery life is not that great. But the same can be said for some Android phones. If, like, for instance, the Samsung Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge, the battery life on them is also quite appalling. But that's the nice thing about Android, is that manufacturers have the option to put in really big and lasting batteries, like the some HTC phones and what is it called? Can't remember what the phone's called, but there are definitely a lot of Android phones that have massive battery life. well, massive batteries. Another argument is that on Apple, you get really good standby times, whereas on up until recently on Android, I keep on getting the two mixed up. God damn it. On Android, the standby time has been appalling, but with the latest Marshmallow update, the standby time has gotten a lot better, but I don't know if it's on the same league as Apple, where you can leave it for a week and it'll only lose 5 to 10% battery life. So I hope this video has helped you clarify between Android and iOS, and if this has helped you decide on which one you want to get, then I'm glad. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and goodbye. Fuck, I just burped. Oopsie.